Every day for the defense in training camp is better than the last, but does that mean we should be concerned about the offense? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate my hashtag everydayers so very much. You all make the world go around. Today on the show, we're continuing to cover Minnesota Vikings training camp, and patterns are beginning to emerge. You know, when I talked to Tyler on yesterday's show about just the way to really get a sense for what matters in camp, what doesn't matter in camp, is what's happening every single day. What are the patterns? And that can be anything from, a player looking particularly good. It can be something like Dwight McGlothern getting an interception in 3 consecutive days. That matters. That means that he's showing something, maybe a step forward from where he was last year, which is especially important because Zamaya Vaughn is also showing a real plucky attempt to take that CB6 job. So that battle is getting really intense to the point where it's going to start pushing out other people like Tavier Thomas, who I think a lot of people saw that and went, oh, okay, so he'll be a depth corner for sure. And now he might be pushed out into the cold. Those are the kinds of things that matter. And maybe on the highest level in camp, the through line has been, holy moly, this defense is punishing. And sometimes J.J. McCarthy on the offense or Sam Howell on the second team offense, or, sometimes they make something happen. Sometimes you get a cool play from Max Brosmer or whatever. But a lot of it is, wow, there was a bunch of sacks. Jonathan Grenard is unblockable. Dallas Turner's smoking all the second team tackles and all that. The defense way ahead of the offense. That is not that crazy in the beginning stages of camp. Defense is simpler to install than offense, just kind of generally. The challenges of defense are more about being reactive, and I think the difference between game day defense and practice defense, I think those are starker than the difference between game day offense and practice offense, because offense dictates so much of the pace that they can do it in shorts, they can do it in a game. It's going to be a lot more similar than, a defense going against a maybe 95% speed offense that's still figuring things out versus a game day defense that's going away. I could be totally off base there, okay? But that's my theory of this. That's not like to excuse anything or to take anything away from Brian Flores' defense, which is playing phenomenally. We should talk about Dwight McGlothern. We should talk about how the D-line has sort of shaped up. We talked to Tyler a little bit about it yesterday. He's my camp correspondent. And other reporters have sort of corroborated what he said. Also, the O-line is back and intact in 11s. We saw Christian Darrisaw. We saw Will Fries actually get in some action. That appears to be Christian Darrisaw returning to practice is like huge. So we'll get into where that is and maybe answer an elephant in the room that's starting to come from camp, which is, do the Vikings still have a major backup QB problem? But first, let's just break down the nature of what is happening on this defense. So there's a lot of sacks. Now look, in practice, the ball always gets thrown, right? So it's easy to mistake, like to look at a really good quarterback day and say, wow, the offense did great. Well, not necessarily. That quarterback probably got sacked and doesn't get that throw off. Now you can still, hey, great throw, right? Or bad throw or whatever. You can still evaluate that throw, which is why the defense lets the quarterback throw, let him get his rep in. But while understanding there was like a problem up front or whatever. So a couple of caveats here. We've only seen 2 padded practices so far. And maybe the most dramatic were the 2 padded practices. So there might even be more signal in that. But whatever happens up front in the trenches when you're in shells, you're in shorts, is whatever. Doesn't really matter. So we've only had a couple of days of this. We still have some small sample stuff to deal with. And again, we're still just talking about practice, right? So nobody freak out about anything just yet. And the other thing is that the O-line hasn't been fully together. So Jonathan Grenard beating the heck out of Justin School is what you would expect, but is also like enough to be like the story of camp. And so at least according to Alec Lewis, who's done a lot of write-ups and a lot of great coverage of camp, Jonathan Grenard is the best player on the field for the Minnesota Vikings. There's no Justin Jefferson, so sure. And Christian Darrisaw wasn't there. So that's probably the next guy that you would say. But Jonathan Grenard seems to be the kind of unblockable superstar. He's having one of those camps that we used to hear about with like Danielle Hunter, where it's like, well, Danielle Hunter is insane. So there's that, and he's always himself, and he's completely unblockable, completely ridiculous player. And then, hey, who else is doing what? It's what you would expect to see. Andrew Van Ginkel is doing stuff. I think Dallas Turner almost got one of the Andrew Van Ginkel pick 6 types. Van Ginkel almost got one for him. On the 2s even, there are some great plays for like Jalen Redmond. There are some great plays in the secondary in particular, and we'll get to the Dwight McGlothern, Zemiah Vaughn thing in a sec, but you also are seeing, hey, great Theo Jackson plays here and there. Metellus and Harrison Smith aren't working a lot. Metellus has been dealing with his ankle. Harrison Smith is just old. He got like a full vet day on Tuesday, and he's, or was it Wednesday, the day they were in shells? And also, I have a feeling that you're just not going to give him that many camp reps anyways. Just like he doesn't need that. But the secondary is making their plays, even in one-on-ones. There's this clip of Zemiah Vaughn on, I think, Jordan Addison, like clamping him, like actually being in really good position against what looked like a pretty nasty route to me. Jeff Okudah is even making some plays, which earlier this week, I expressed a whole bunch of concern about the way that he plays. And he's been really, really, really sticky in press man situations. I haven't gotten to see a clip where I can see exactly what he does on the release yet. If anyone has that, please link it to me, like in the YouTube comments, or send it an email to me at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. If you have a clip of specifically Jeff Okudah in press man and you can see the release, I want to see it, but I haven't gotten to see that. So, because I'm really curious to see if he's going to keep playing that like super aggressive brand of football, or did he give up on that and now he's a way better corner, which is kind of what I hypothesized would happen. I'm curious to kind of check my own work on that, but he has made a couple of plays. On Wednesday, there were 4 interceptions and potentially a 5th. That could have been a 5th. I think Blake Cashman almost had another one. One by each quarterback. So nobody gets ahead of each other there. But Sam Howell has thrown some interceptions all the time. You've seen like Brosmer and Brett Rippon make bad plays. You've seen J.J. McCarthy have up and down days depending on his accuracy or whatever, but is also like there was a situational drill where the first 2 plays were sacks, immediate sacks, and JJ McCarthy had no room to go anywhere. What I don't know enough about is who the sacks are on and who the sacks are from. You can see, wow, great period for the defense, but if it's the second team versus the third team and it's Dallas Turner beating up on Henry Bird, then there's not necessarily as much signal on that. And that's what I'm not really quite able to puzzle together from just the camp reports that we have. And we don't need that because all of those players, beyond the first team, are going to put out plenty of tape on the preseason debut against, I believe it is the Tennessee Titans. No, the Texans. Texans. Against the Texans on August 9th. We'll see that, right? So we don't have to make any sweeping declarations there. What's going to be interesting about that is who does and doesn't play. Certain players on the sort of cusp of being a starter or not, right? Jalen Naylor, is he going to play? If he plays, then they maybe want to see more from him, or they think that he needs the reps. Will Dallas Turner play? Technically, he's a second teamer, but they've referred to him as a starter. And starters won't play in this preseason game. That's the way Kevin O'Connell does it. So you're not going to see J.J. McCarthy. I would imagine you will not see him. I would imagine you will not see Jonathan Grenard for sure, or like Christian Darrisaw, especially people like Darrisaw, Metellus dealing with injuries. But will you see Naylor? Will you see Will you see Theo Jackson? What does this team determine as a starter? And some of those guys will play one drive because they're like technically not a starter yet. And then like Josh Metellus played one drive of the preseason sometimes. Then, you move on after that. But people who have kind of solidified their spot that they don't really need to see anything more from, they'll hold that off on the preseason. And then they'll run those guys into the ground in the joint practices to make up for those reps. And that's the way that they prefer to do it. But headline is defense is playing really well. It's multiple. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on. There's like 3 edge formations with Turner, Grenard, and Van Ginkel all on the field at the same time. They're getting interceptions. They're making plays on the ball. They're covering tight. They're blitzing. They're winning their one-on-ones in pass protection. They're just doing everything. There are a couple of personnel notes about that are worth going into. But also, then you have to flip to the offense and ask, okay, how much should we could be concerned about this? That'll all be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by the 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. Fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy. It is the perfect golf drink. I used to work at the Wilds at a golf course in Prior Lake when I was a kid. And you could always tell when someone was having a good round or a bad round because they would come in, they would either look tired or they would look excited. And the people who looked excited, maybe they had a 5-Hour Energy. When I was working there, this was a relatively new product. That was really, really kind of the fresh new thing to do was bring a 5-Hour Energy on the course, knock it back during the back 9 and get that extra little bit of energy so you could finish your round strong. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off of your order. The offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. This code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends, trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5-Hour Energy shots today. Moving on with the Locked On Vikings podcast, a couple of personnel notes you have to see. Christian Darrisaw returns to the field. Will Fries returns to the field. So the Vikings had their true offensive line in 11-on-11s for the first time. Now, they opened camp with Christian Darrisaw doing work in Indo and stuff. So they weren't too far from this in the first place, but now they truly have it. So a lot of those reports from earlier in camp where, the defense killed the offensive line. Well, that was Blake Brandel at right guard, right? That was Justin School at left tackle. And those guys probably were taking some of the losses. I have to imagine. I don't know that for sure, though. But you got to think. So now that it's the full offensive line, and a couple of those guys are still kind of ramping up, I am not too shocked to hear that they're getting off to a little bit of a slower start, trying to get that chemistry back together. Donovan Jackson is an interesting one. It sounds like his camp is up and down. But again, a lot of that has been without pads. So ups and downs are a lot less important until then when you do get the pads on, then you'll see every clip that I have seen that I've been able to see Donovan Jackson on. I'm trying to seek him out specifically. And he is somebody who, again, will be very curious to see if he plays in the preseason. If he doesn't, he's got that starting job on lock, which it seems like he does. He has been the first team starting left guard. I don't think Blake Brandel has taken any of those reps. It hasn't been a competition, like even in formality, they're not trading reps. Correct me if I'm wrong there, though. I have not seen that reported. So it seems like he has that starting job on lock. I would kind of like to see him in the preseason, even if he's surrounded by the rest of the twos, just to get him that work. Like, I think that would be a good decision just to get him the extra work. But like, if you're using joint practices for that and then you're just using the preseason to figure out who makes the team, like, sure, whatever. I get it. But every time I've been able to see him in a clip, it looks pretty good. It looks okay at least. I did see Jonathan Allen bull rush him back pretty hard, but like that's Jonathan Allen. Like I'm not gonna expect you to 1v1 that guy and beat him up. That dude's like a perennial Pro Bowler. Like you're a for day one rookie. Like my expectation is not for you to win every rep against that guy. And so from what I have seen, which is extraordinarily limited, I am pretty satisfied. But it's too limited for me to really be confident in that. That said, having the offensive line back, not having to flirt with a lot of those questions. Like, 3 months ago, we were talking about, okay, so Justin School, well, he's probably going to play 3 or 4 games. I don't think he's going to play any. I think week 1, we are going to have Christian Darrisaw. And not even a month ago, you had report, I think it was, again, Alec Lewis, who said that, man, that seemed like it was going to be like this distant dream. No, not anymore. Darrisaw is getting ready. I emphasize that timeline is insane. He tore his ACL and MCL around Halloween. He had to wait for the swelling to go down with the MCL, just like TJ Hawkinson did. Couldn't have surgery on it right away, had to wait. And then from the surgery, you need a 9-month turnaround. A 9-month turnaround from that surgery day would have put him at like a return somewhere around the start of the regular season. We are a full month fast. That's crazy. But it's also, and now like there is proof enough to know that this isn't just coach speak or a team trying to do PR, that this really is happening and he did accomplish it. So good for him. Elsewhere in the personnel world, the secondary competitions are getting really interesting. Jeff Okudah and Mekhi Blackmon are more of a competition than I had kind of come to understand, which I think is smart. Because I was pretty surprised about that. So I'm glad to know that, that wasn't the nature of things, that those guys really are competing. And it isn't just Okudah gets a job right away. I thought that reflected really poorly on Mekhi Blackmon. So it's nice to learn that it's not really true. But the competition on the second team defensive backs and third team defensive backs is pretty fascinating. It's Amaya Vaughn firmly with the twos, alongside Dwight McGlothern. Those two guys are really duking it out for position on the roster. But as I discussed with Tyler yesterday, you don't necessarily need to choose one or the other. I think there are two spots up for grabs once you look at somebody like Tavierre Thomas as expendable, and that those two guys are winning those two jobs really, really comfortably. I've also seen, I've just seen in the couple of clips that I've seen Khalif Hailasi and Ambry Thomas on the wrong end of some pretty gnarly stuff. So, those guys falling away and McGlothern and Zamaya Vaughn kind of rising up. And then suddenly you have this really clearly defined 6 cornerback situation. But making things even more complicated there, Jay Ward and Theo Jackson Jay Ward on Wednesday apparently had a crazy day with a great pass breakup. I think one of the interceptions was his, and, really good work on the one-on-ones. Had a really big day. Big moment for Jay Ward, who is, going into his 3rd year now, hasn't really been able to crack a very rotational lineup and has mostly just been a special teams guy. He's having a very Brian Asamoah-like career, who, by the way, Brian Asamoah really is, I think, on the outside looking into this roster right now with Eric Wilson and Kobe King around. But again, preseason can really decide a lot of that, right? A 6th round rookie can have a dreadful preseason and absolutely get cut. That is not a golden ticket to the roster. Even on a team like the Vikings that seem to really favor keeping their rookies, even if their rookies are playing bad, just to preserve the draft pick and not expose it to waivers. You can still, anyone can Willie Beavers this, right? And I haven't really heard one thing one way or another about Kobe King yet. So jury's out. But regardless, I think Jay Ward is very much in a situation where he could be exposed to that same thing sooner rather than later. So you want to see something from him. Nice to see him have a good day. Also, on the sort of same note, we have the first transaction. Max Tooley, linebacker Max Tooley, is out. Gervarius Owens is in. He was a 7th round pick a year or two ago. He is now in. So there you go. So your first little bottom roster change. This sort of shuffling happens on every team, so there's nothing really much to read into it. But the takeaway, I guess, is this secondary is all making plays. And even on the top side, too. Jeff Okudah's had a couple of really great highlights. Isaiah Rodgers has had some good highlights now that he's back from an injury that held him out a little bit. It's sort of all coming together on defense. And look, I know that in camp, you're not going to see the craziest stuff. There's some stuff sitting in a notebook on Brian Flores' desk that will not come out until, a big moment in a big game in the regular season, and you're never going to see them practice it even in a place where there's media availability, let alone fans all recording, even though you tell them not to. So this is a version of the Brian Flores defense that is going to be just a scotch more vanilla than usual. And I will also say in the preseason, you're probably not even going to see all that much blitzing, maybe the most vanilla blitzes, like the core stuff to sort of get reps on, but you're going to see nothing creative at all in the preseason, which is going to make the defense probably look worse than it is. That is a thing to keep in mind. But it's really hard not to get wrapped up in this tidal wave of optimism about the defense. And it's really exciting. Look, defense has been good for a couple of years now, but it's also been solvable for a couple of years now by the right kinds of coach and QB pairings. And that's going to be the question, is how does this stand up to Jared Goff? How does this stand up to Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor, who got their GOAT a couple years ago really, really good? How is this going to stand up, by the way, to someone like Lamar Jackson? How this whole thing is going to work there. Well, actually, maybe one of the most famous Flores games ever was against Lamar Jackson in the, I think, 2019 or 2020 season when the Dolphins were really bad and they beat MVP level Lamar Jackson with a crazy like blitz scheme. So maybe that's the great matchup. But all that said, I think the proof that I am understanding here is, while it can be figured out by the right group of people, I don't think we are walking into a situation where the blueprint is out and everyone's going to do it and the defense is just solved and everyone's good against it now. That's the thing that I'm not. That's a worry that I think is in the back of everybody's head, and I think they're doing quite a bit to assuage that worry. We should talk about the offense, though, because if the offense is having all this trouble, can we point to a reason for it? Is that reason concerning enough? And is there time to do anything about it? And what's going on with the backup QBs? I think we should really sort of assess the damage on offense and see just how concerned we should be. That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Monarch Money. If you've ever looked at your bank account, especially say at the first of the month, and suddenly realize some problems you didn't know you had, maybe you wish managing your money was a little bit easier than that. And with Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you right in the driver's seat. It can help you budget and, put together a report of where you're spending, see where you can cut back, whether that's, online shopping or delivery apps or whatever else you're spending too much on. You can make those decisions with a little bit more information, but it is so much more than that in one. If you have an investments app, this can be your investments app now. It can be your budgeting app, of course, as well. It can also manage joint accounts. So if you and your partner need to stay on the same page, communicating about the money in the joint account, this can be the place where all that information lives easily and conveniently. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL and at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off of your first year. Moving along here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Do the Vikings have a backup QB problem? Like, should we talk about this? So the I guess crux of the conversation is with Sam Howell himself, because as Tyler told us yesterday from his report of camp, Brett Rippon and Max Brosmer are sort of competing as QB3. Sam Howell is firmly QB2, but he's had a lot of bad plays. And what I don't know is what the full body of work is. Tyler said that it didn't look great. It was up and down, but it wasn't this like apocalyptic thing. I'm going to see the interceptions a lot on social media, right? That's what we're going to be exposed to if we're not actually there physically. And that means that like the outliers are going to be the things that are shown the most. If the Vikings do have a backup QB problem, it's a fairly solvable one, right? There's always interesting quarterbacks getting cut. Hey, maybe Kenny Pickett's about to become available from Cleveland. There's stuff you can go do about that. I think the bigger concern would be, is JJ McCarthy struggling at camp? And again, if you're there and you're watching directly and you're getting the whole sense of it, you're going to get a better idea for the answer to that question than people who just watch clips. And the people who have done that, the reporters, the Tylers, the Fornos of the world, have all said that they like what they've seen for the most part. Yeah, there's a little bit of spraying here and there. There's some inaccuracy. He's doing that over-rotation thing that I've talked about so much. That's still very much there. But there's probably been more good than bad. It sounds like there's been quite a bit, actually, more good than bad. It hasn't been perfect. It would be kind of crazy if it was. But there's been more good than bad. So there's not like a concern there with JJ McCarthy at quarterback, but that the first team offense has had its struggles with protecting, right? And, with all the problems on the O-line we just discussed. And Also, a big problem, not having Justin Jefferson. That's going to make a first-team offense maybe not quite as effective, but it's a second-team offense that's been having more problems. I've seen some reps where Rondale Moore doesn't look so good, where Tim Jones doesn't look so good, where Ty Felton doesn't look so good. I think those three are the second-team 3 wide receivers. So, or no, it's Lucky Jackson. It's Lucky Jackson, not Tim Jones. So those are the second team wide receivers, and there are moments where those guys don't quite do as well. There's also moments where those guys pop up in with the ones and play at wide receiver 3 with the ones and play really well. So is it any specific individual guy's fault? No. But I would say the second team corners, the Dwight McGlotherns and Zamiah Vaughns getting all this hype, are ahead of the Rondale Moores and the Lucky Jacksons. Because camp is always only relative. You can only judge this via the context, like against how it's going with somebody else. It makes it really hard to judge, right? Is Dwight McGlothern having a renaissance? Does Rondale Moore suck? Is it a mixture of the two? All you know is relative. All you know is that Zamiah Vaughn is having a better week than Tim Jones is or Ty Felton is. And so you can't look at that and say, well, Ty Felton sucks. Right? That would be very irresponsible to do. You can just say that, hey, somebody got his licks on him. And then hopefully you can compare and contrast across a whole bunch of matchups and get a sense for, wow, so-and-so's losing to everybody, right? Khalif Hailasi, he's losing to everybody. He's on the wrong end of a million bad reps, having a bad camp, right? And on the flip side, Dwight McGlothern's having a good camp. He's beating a bunch of people. Jeff Okudah is having, it seems like a really nice camp. So he's beating a bunch of people. He might be winning that CB3 job, whether it's a competition or not. He might make it a moot point pretty quick. That is how you get that sense for that, right? So with Sam Howell, it seems like he is just not that accurate of a quarterback. But the way that he is losing is the way that he always lost, right? There's talent, there's cool throws, but it's simply a very risky way to play, and it's not accurate enough to mitigate those risks. So you get really streaky quarterback play, big highs, low lows, interceptions, and good throws, and the kind of guy that you can't exactly entrust your franchise to. It's very Nick Mullins coded, right? It's very, be a gunslinger, be a crazy QB. They seem to like that guy as a backup, right? Give you the sort of variance. If he does have to come in for a game, yeah, he can steal a stupid one with 3 interceptions and 3 touchdowns and the right luck, right? And that does a lot more for you than someone like Sean Mannion, who will operate an offense, give you absolutely no ceiling, and you'll be punting 8 times in the game. But to me, the whole body of work doesn't sound like it's a let's get rid of Sam Howell thing. But hey, I'm definitely, that is not a unanimous opinion. Alec Lewis just posted a 53-man roster in which he cut Sam Howell, kept Brett Rippon, and said maybe they bring in some outside help at backup quarterback, a la the year when they had Kellen Mond and Sean Mannion, cut them both and traded for Nick Mullins. That could be the case. That would be a pretty rough one because they did trade a draft pick for Sam Howell. To cut him in the same offseason would be pretty rough. So I don't see that happening. I think Alec Lewis is just kind of making a point about what he's been seeing on the field when the twos are out there. I think Sam Howell's just going to be the backup. And yeah, man, he's going to spray some and he's going to throw some interceptions. We know that about him. And which is, I guess, the last thing that I'll say about the backup QB situation is both Rippon and Howell are very known quantities. This camp is a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of information we have on those guys from throughout their entire careers, from throughout, their pre-draft processes, which I know they still probably have a lot of internal documentation on that anyways. They aren't probably going to be making these decisions too much on the goings on of camp when it comes to these veteran guys. Camp is huge when you're a younger guy and you haven't proven a lot. But guys with starting experience, I think speaks a little bit louder than what you do in practice. And as with all things in this backup world, the preseason is going to have a monumental impact as compared to all of those things. If Sam Howell sucks in the preseason and Brett Rippon lights up somebody's third team, we could start having much more interesting conversations here, but probably not in practice with 2 veteran guys. Now, 2 brand new guys like Zamiah Vaughn and Dwight McGlothern, right, that have a year of experience between them, those guys can make a ton of progress in camp because you do expect some changes in their skill level, right? But it's just different when you're a little bit more of a veteran guy. I will talk to you all tomorrow with continued updates on what's going on Minnesota Vikings training camp. But that'll be it for now. And as always, Skull.